We are live.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Maggie Ullman, and I'd like to welcome you to the February 17th, 2026 Planning, Economic Development, and Environment Committee remote meeting. All of our council members and staff are participating virtually. To help anyone out there following along, I'll state each section of the agenda aloud. We are streaming this on our live virtual engagement hub, which is accessible through the link on the front of the city's webpage. We also have an option for the public to listen live by phone. For those of you out there today listening, hello and welcome. For today's meeting, we do have the option to call in and comment live during the meeting. To call in and comment, use the number 855-925-2801 with meeting code 8187. Your phone will be muted and you'll hear the meeting live. At this point, speakers will need to push *3 and then you'll be in the speaker queue. We do our public comment at the end of the agenda, which you'll see as I go through. I'll start off with a roll call. I invite committee members and staff to come off of mute and say hello after I call your name. First person is Councilwoman Sage Turner.
Hello.
As well, we also have Councilwoman Kim Roney.
Good afternoon.
Our Assistant City Manager, Ben Woody.
Good afternoon.
Janice Ashley, our Deputy City Attorney.
She is in today, so she might be joining late. This is Assistant City Attorney Carly Gillingham.
Great, you're the next on our list. Hey. We also have Mark Matheny, our Development Services Director. I did see him earlier. We have our Planning and Urban Design Director, Steph Dahl.
Hello, everyone.
We have Chris Collins, our Planning and Urban Design Assistant Director.
Good afternoon, everyone.
And Kira Boulan, our Interim Sustainability Director.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Glad you're all here. So we will start at the top of our agenda with agenda item number 1, which is approval of the January 20th, 2026 meeting minutes. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved. Second.
And I will do a roll call vote, as is our practice when meeting virtually. Councilwoman Turner.
Aye.
Councilwoman Roney.
Aye.
And myself, aye. The motion passes. Okay, we will move on to agenda item 2. We typically do quarterly updates. We have so much good work happening with our staff. And so as we churn through the different departments that connect with this committee, we like to kind of hear on the metrics and performance outcomes of the good work happening and the good work happening out in the community. So today, our Development Services Director, Mark Matheny, is going to provide update on the state of development and permitting in the community.
Yeah, good afternoon. Thank you. Mark Matheny, Director of Development Services. And this is kind of a combined presentation. We've got a few items that from straight up just kind of permitting data that I'll relay and kind of identify how that lays into some of our goals. And then Steph Dahl, Director of Planning and Urban Design, and her team have a significant portion to go through as well. And
Mark,
so,
jump in. Can I just ask? I'm going to try and help us with time watching, just because these committee meetings can go long. What amount of time should I expect from your and Steph's presentation, so I can just help mile mark if we're running behind?
mine's probably 2 minutes.
Oh, okay.
But Steph and Chris, I guess Chris is going to present also. I don't know, but it's a bigger piece, and then it leads to some discussion time at the end. So I'm not sure, Steph, what do you think on that?
Let's try to do this in 15 minutes and allow for 5 to 10 minutes of discussion. And Maggie, if you feel like we're spending too much time on it, we're happy to move along. So.
And similarly, if we need more time, it's really just administrative of just wanting to help keep track. So, okay, we'll use that as a mile marker, and then council, we can spend as much time as we need because it's our time to learn. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Appreciate that question and good concept. So I'll just grab these first couple slides. We're going to talk about a permitting update through today's presentation, permitting update, obviously, and growth development conversation. So next slide, Katie. On the permitting side of the just straight up permitting part of things, once again, it's good. People want to be here. People want to do things here. So the volume in general construction industry in Asheville remains consistent and as well as strong. The numbers, the hard numbers that you're going to see early on are basically based on consensus reporting data, which is something that we provide to the, not consensus, sorry, census reporting is something that we provide to the Census Bureau quarterly. And so they're looking for specific numbers. And the reason why we provide the updates based on this census reporting is really comparable, right? So if you go to Greensboro or High Points or Winston-Salem and you want to know how they're doing with their volumes, that's really the information that they're going to provide. What this doesn't have is like, because any jurisdiction can have multiple individual permit types as well, like deck permits and roof permits and window permits if people do that. So this is basically, it's new and renovations for residential. It's new buildings and renovations for commercial. It's duplexes, townhomes, mobile homes, that sort of thing. And you'll see a slide that kind of breaks that down. So it's a consistent number of items that we're reporting on. And then additionally, as you see what's presented here, but then as we talk to each other and as we talk through the community, we want to be sure that our conversations continue to revolve around resilience and sustainability of whether it's recovery or whether it's our future, right? One thing to keep in mind is that for sure the state building codes and then some of our ordinances are this way as well, is they basically are providing a minimum level of compliance. And as we're talking to contractors and designers and developers on the building code side of things, there's always a way to do better, right? Now, there's a number of factors of why somebody wants to stay at the minimum. Most commonly is time and money. The investment to do additional steps affects both of those. So just keep that in mind while we think about how we continue our recovery and our future development conversations. So next slide, please, Katie. And so this is just the brunt of where we've been since basically 2018. And once again, this is a lift of the census-based type of permits. And what we have at the far right, I'm sorry, it's not year to date. I couldn't get that off of there. It's basically the second quarter, right? This is through December. But it is a good indicator as to where we are, for the most part, halfway through the year, right? And so we can see a comparison where we've been permit-wise over the past many years, from 2018 till now, kind of where the highs and lows have come, and then where we are, we're on actually a pretty good track, being in the second quarter of 2026. And next slide, please, Katie. So I'll be honest with you, on this slide, I took this in and out of this presentation a couple of times. It is construction value, right, which is super, super important. But if you look at last year in 2025 and then this year already, the cost of construction is so outrageous over these past couple of years, just because there's a number of reasons, right? There's a million exterior factors, whether it's labor, whether it's material costs, whether it's supply chain. They're just really, really strong. So it's a little bit of a deceiving number to actually have the construction costs on there. But I thought it was important to just be able to show where that stands and where we stand right now. And next slide, please, Katie. So relative to housing, I wanted to break this down. Like I mentioned at the beginning, these are census-based items that we pick up. This is an average of permits per year. And this is taking all of those, whatever that was, 7 or 8 years, and basically breaking them into an average. And so we have single family residents at 267, single family alterations, 1,078. I don't have to read all of them, but townhouses, duplex, mobile homes, and then multifamily buildings, actually. And so the next tab over, really the best way I could do this all on one slide. I know it's probably too much information to put on one slide, but really what I wanted to do is you see a minus and a plus for our second quarter of 2026. This is how we're trending based on those previous years, right? So single family residents, for example, we're typically at 267. We're less than half that right now for new single family residents. But we're actually more than that for single family residence alterations, right? So anytime we see a plus, we're going to be, we're trending higher based on the second quarter for all of these items. Yes.
So are we thinking, excuse me, are we thinking that Helene repairs are under single family alterations?
And that's a great point. I'm so glad you brought that up. That's actually a different table. So I have that at the end of the permit data, and I should have mentioned that at the beginning, that this is separate from anything that's
Okay.
relative to Helene permitting, which we still track separately.
Okay, thank you. Just a plug for later, I'd love to see ADUs listed.
That's a great point. I think that comes up later on, though.
Since we're, I mean, pausing for questions,
Sure.
can we get the units in a follow-up for the multifamily?
I can, but I can't get them for that duration, right? Because right now, and we're changing that with our new permitting software, we're actually having a place in there that calls those out. But we basically have to manually go in and pull those out. So it is a bit of a heavy piece, and we're not going to have it all. I don't think we have it all the way back to 2018. But we do have it. And so we'll be glad as a follow-up to provide what we do have taken out already. Yeah.
And
Yeah,
maybe
even can't update
that's
it.
my request of if it doesn't fit squarely into this unit of time, it's helpful, as Sage is also saying, to see all these different housing types together and the units if we know that housing supply is something really important to council. So whether it's this unit of time, the big picture of all the types together would be very helpful for policymaking perspective and to see that routinely over time.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Just to add to the conversation, I know there's a conversation and including a list of questions. Essentially, I've requested that the data that used to be presented to the Affordable Housing Advisory Committee around sort of like a housing pipeline be available to council again, since AHAC's not meeting. That data isn't public facing, but it also hasn't been available to us. So it does make me wonder if instead of duplicating or fracturing the data, if we might put it in one place. So if a housing pipeline would show where units are in the permitting process, where they are design review or PRC approval or conditional zoning approval, and then whether or not they've received some sort of subsidy, land use incentive grant, housing trust fund, and where they are in the pipeline to get done. Is it possible they all need to be in one place, or does this really need to be a separate thing that we're looking at regularly?
I would, if anybody knows more than I do, please speak up.
I just wanted to say, I think right now staff is just taking notes, and that afterwards we're going to have a conversation about analytics, right? And the data that we're collecting now. I want to underscore something here. Mark kind of buried a lead, which is that we are switching to a new permitting system, and our old permitting system has a lot of deficiencies. Certain types of permits, for example, ADUs, were not tracked under the name AD. I'm getting real insider baseball here, but we're not even tracked under the name ADUs when they first started. So we have to do a lot of manual sorting through the data to provide things that are meaningful, and we're happy to do that, but we're learning as we're going. You're going to get better data as this new system comes online. And to answer Councilperson Roney's question, I think we need to have a conversation about how we can just be the most efficient, transparent, and accessible with the way staff provides data to all of the council committees and council. And we're happy to have input from you all about what that could look like. And we'll go back and figure that out.
Yeah, thanks, Steph. And Kim, thank you as well. I really think that housing type pipeline is essential. I think that's a really, really good suggestion. And I actually just saw a peer of ours in Raleigh posting from their work session. I don't know if it was a committee or not, and I'll look online for the materials. But it was tracking, they've just done a bunch of missing middle, and they're tracking missing middle housing types by neighborhood geographically. Anyhow, I do think that pipeline would be really helpful, because that'll help us diagnose we're doing everything right. It's the financing, or maybe we need a shot clock on this stage of permitting because things are getting stuck and falling off the radar or what have you. It'll help us really see. So I hear, Steph, you saying we're transitioning systems that have differing capacities, and by no means do we want to like have an exercise of crunching numbers for crunching numbers' sake. But I would love this committee to move into a direction where we have consistent metrics to be looking at around housing supply and permitting at the big picture by housing type, whatever way we can. Certainly this year would be a great target to aspire to. So just peppering in for the analytics conversation. I find this very exciting. Thank you for all the cumbersome crunching that's been done to tap the system we already have so far.
Yeah, my hope is, and staff will know best how to present this, but if there's a multi-solving tool, so you're not like, oh, did we copy this into the permit thing? Oh, did we copy this into the housing pipeline? Is there a one-stop shop? Maybe it's multiple tabs, where it would be helpful to the Housing Recovery Board for CDBGDR funds, and also to the Affordable Housing Advisory Committee if and when it comes back, and also HCD, and also this committee. That way you're not having to manage multiple documents. Maybe that's too big, but my hope was to not have to worry about parts getting left out and having multiple tools to have to keep up.
Sage, did you still have a question, or is Mark ready to go?
Oh, I'm sorry. It was still up. I didn't mean for it to be up. I'm good. And I know you have all that data, so however you get it to us will be helpful when you have time.
Yeah.
First.
And yeah, exactly. And I do appreciate the conversation. We are kind of just kind of drafting together what a consistent presentation looks like as far as being able to provide that year over year and quarterly within that year. So thank you all. Katie, can we do next slide here? So we looked at, a little bit of the housing side of things, and then, I just kind of sleeve the commercial aspects into the economy, just because it is driving engine for the most part. And once again, we've got our average, we've got commercial new and commercial alterations, what we're averaging on a per year basis, and then where we trend on the second quarter of fiscal year 2026 through the end of December. For new commercial, we're slightly down. And for commercial alterations, we are definitely above. And I wanted to get to this slide before I chimed in on that. This is, in the times we looked at the value of construction, and all the way on the 2026, it was super high. Last year was super high. When we start seeing there's problems basically getting money, when money is hard to get, when it's expensive, we trend toward alterations as opposed to new work. And so it's a little easier to manage. There's not as much infrastructure that's required. And there's certainly not as much expense output. So this is not uncommon to see a trend similar to this. And so we're doing better, certainly on the second quarter of 26 on the commercial alteration side of things. And then I also include down here the trade permits, which I'll tell you right now is not part of the census reporting, but it is very important because our trade permits are a lot, right? It's a big part of our industry, but it's also a big part of like the first step of workforce development, right? When we're talking about workforce development on the construction side of things, this is a majority of where people are coming in, right? They're coming in to learn to be mechanical contractors, to be electricians, to be plumbers, and that sort of thing. And a lot of our trade industries, our local trade industries even, are either have or are working on some pretty strong apprenticeship type programs that'll get 4-year and 6-year programs in to allow people to get that trade skill and either be an advantage to that company or start their own company. And so there's a lot that happens with trades. They obviously work for a larger contractor doing the commercial alterations, but then they also are the ones that are out there doing the AC change, the mechanical change outs and the heat pumps and for the winter and electrical service change outs and that sort of stuff. So there's a great deal of that work. And next slide, Katie, please. And so we're still tracking anything that is relative to TS-Aline. We still have a separate permit for that. And this is a capture from probably earlier in the week or last week of our Asheville recovers. This is an ongoing dashboard. It's always out there. And so we can see where we're at as far as the applications received and then the value. It is significantly slowing down, but also in talking to people who are permitting through January and February, they're just now seeing their own their homeowners insurance come through or their commercial business insurance coming through. So it's taken these people a long time to get there. And so that's why we want to leave this open and still allow these TS-Aline permits to stay a little bit separate on their own. So we can keep track of that. And as you may or may not be aware, we waive the permit fees for that. And so that's roughly about 1.25 million in revenue that was also waived. While it's certainly a hit on our side of things, it's a huge advantage to these building owners, homeowners, and business owners to just be slightly alleviated from the everything else that's going on in their life. Yes.
That was 1.2 million for Helene fee waivers.
Yeah, slightly above that actually. Yeah.
That's great. I'm proud of us. And I know that staff
So-
appreciated that before council even had to ask. Y'all just knew it was the right thing to do. And I know that, so thanks. I wanted to get into the real explicitness of this definition to make sure I'm understanding. So total value of applied permits. The total value means the cost, the value when done. Tell me what that actually means. The cost.
Yeah, so that's what we're being provided, right? So that's that as the contractor comes in, fills out the application, gives us all the data, all the information for the construction process. We ask for a cost of construction, and they provide us a cost of construction, and we we base our plan review and our permit fees off of that for commercial, not for residential. For commercial, we base our permit fees and plan review fees off of that, and so yes, that may not be the actual real number. It could be slightly higher, but we also have a backstop. We have a self check that allows us to make sure that we're not, you can't build a commercial space for $25 a square foot, right? And we have a document that we keep track of that allows us, you've got to be within a few percentages of what, basically the International Code Council publishes a cost of construction document quarterly. And we keep that on hand. And if things look really outrageous, then we'll refer back to that. So that is roughly the costs of construction as we are provided from the application process.
Great. And I had one more question, then Sage, I'll bounce over to you. is there any, I have a curiosity when we're looking at these fees, whether it's TS Saline or at large, of what the impact is of this construction to property tax. Is there any data pathway to crosswalk that type of valuation for the revenue to the city? And you don't have to answer. So it might be just like put that on the table as a top bullet, because ultimately, we're going into hard budget conversations as a council. And I'm going to be highlighting that I want us to be greater exploring revenue opportunities that aren't just on the property tax backs. And so just, I feel blind into even thinking about that because, not necessarily getting that type of data. And so it might be more of a budgeting, permitting collaboration, but that's a curiosity of mine. Of what does this translate to? Are we getting more resources to have better services for our community based on this? I can assume, but I'd love to know what that data path would look like.
Thank you.
And that might even be more important on the other arm, not just the Helene recovery.
Absolutely.
Both for Helene recovery and the other kind of dashboard thing we're talking about. I'm curious if there's anything to be gained from breaking it down by trade. I know we get the data because the application will say you're spending this much on electrical, this much on plumbing, whatever. But I just wonder if there's anything to be gained, if you guys saw anything interesting in that before you just totaled it. Like with Helene, is it all plumbing repairs, or out there in commercial permits on a, if we're doing 75 permits for commercial alterations a month, what is it? It's just curious. Is it all sewer maintenance? Like I'd just be interested in that data if it highlights anything of value.
Yeah, and trying to kind of see a pattern base more than anything. And I'll be honest with you, especially this time of the year, really a majority of what we see are mechanical changeouts, right? Getting older systems into new systems, and then service upgrades, because sometimes a mechanical changeout requires a service upgrade. So as far as trade volume, those sit way on top of the volume of any of the other trades.
In which case, Maggie, no impact to property tax revenues, repair and replace, upgrade, etc., which is kind of what I'm getting at.
Thanks. Now, in the spirit of what I brought up at the top, let's keep rolling. Thanks.
Yeah,
but we want to ask questions. This is good. It's keeping us moving on.
Yeah, it is great. And the next slide basically says questions. And then we may have covered all them, and then Steph kind of picks up from here.
And I'm conscientious that we are almost 30 minutes into the meeting. So the next part of the slide presentation really is an opportunity for you to just think about a couple of different pieces of data that are around growth and development. We're looking at application trends by development type. And I mean type of, like, is it a level 1? Is it a conditional zoning? From that permitting perspective, talking about remodels and alterations versus new builds, which Mark brought up earlier. Looking at the housing gap and looking at our vacant quote. We'll talk about that definition, our vacant housing units, how that housing pipeline actually ends up working after you approve projects, talking about where Asheville is growing. And all in all, we really just want to underscore for you that we are just starting our data journey as we move into the comp plan update and UDO rewrite. It's really important foundational part of it. So this is a great conversation for us. Sage.
Oh God, it shouldn't be up. Sorry.
Okay, next slide. All right, so we're looking at just the volume of permits by type. So this is not including the kinds of permits that Mark was talking about. That's like if you're getting a trade permit. We're just looking at like development proposals from the standpoint of like a level 1, which is the smallest level, or level 3 threshold and conditional zonings that go to council. So big data disclaimer here. I mentioned it earlier that our system, we're picking some of these things out manually, and the way we handle these reviews change over time. So council approved in 2025 a change to level 1 threshold. So you're going to see a drop in the number of level 1s we have because there's just not going to be as many of them. That changed the way we work. But what we wanted to point out here is that the applications are not increasing. And while you're not going to see this data point here, if you take a look at Asheville, and I mean the city of Asheville's population growth over time, which is about 1% a year, we're growing, but we're not growing in a huge way. We're not, and I know a lot of people have this feeling that we're growing exponentially. We're seeing this huge boom. We have a healthy, steady growth is what we should take away from that to some extent. Next slide. So some food for thought on this. Mark mentioned this, that right now what we're seeing is an increase in alterations and remodeling. So single family and commercial alterations both are up. New construction is down. That is also the trend nationally. So the National Home Builders Association talks about how, and they're specific to residential, this is driven by higher interest rates. Also our aging housing stock across the country and affordability constraints of developing new homes, which include things that Mark talked about, just like the rising cost of actually being able to get labor, to get materials, in addition to mortgage rates. And so on this graph, what you're seeing is that pretty much after the pandemic, the interest mortgage rates went up. And while in this graph, it might look like there's not as high as they were in 1982, let me remind you that no one who was buying their home in 1982 is now worrying about a mortgage interest rate. And what we're concerned about when we're looking at housing a lot of the time is, like first-time home buyers. Because they don't have any equity to plow into that first house. They're, while we're looking at rates that are under maybe 6% at this time, and they're coming down a little bit, they're still pretty high. And that means a lot when the median housing cost in Asheville-Buncombe County is going to be like $450,000 to $500,000 a home. Next slide. So let's talk about the housing gap. This is something that we presented a few months ago at HCD, and we wanted to bring it to you to think about as well. Last year, you saw an update from we call it the Bowen Report, aka the Housing Needs Assessment, about the number of housing units we need in the area. Here we're highlighting just rental units. Rental units that we need in the next 5 years are over 6,000. And if you take a look at what we're calling the number of viable units per year, which is conditional zonings that you have approved that are either been built or under construction or have pulled a permit to do some kind of construction, or we even called all of these folks and said, are you going to build? We really looked and said, we are not, production's about half of what we need. So that's like 606 units a year, maybe that might be coming through that pipeline where we really need over 1,200 units of rental a year. Next slide. So some preliminary disclaimer, food for thought on our vacant housing units. So as you know, lots of people produce data, and the data that I was looking at here is really from the census for the city of Asheville. The initial review of that data really makes it look like Asheville is performing like a rural vacation or second home area, like someplace like Watauga County, rather than a city or even a tourist-based city. When it comes to the percentage of vacant versus occupied housing units that we have available. Some mountain and coastal communities here or counties, what we looked at, have an overall vacant housing rate that is higher than ours. So if you were to look at like a newspaper article, and there are plenty of them out there, they're not going to show Asheville or Buncombe County being in the highest rates. But when it comes to an area that's urbanized, and if you look at other cities in the Southeast or other US cities, even that are the same size of ours and that are kind of considered popular tourism destinations, our vacancy rate, which is anywhere, depending on who's reporting, between 20% and 30% of our housing is not being occupied by full-time. Yeah, I know, it's pretty shocking. It looks pretty high. So if you kind of start crunching more numbers, that suggests that there's about 15,000 housing units in Asheville that might be vacant. And if our vacancy rate was in line with other cities, that would mean maybe about 5,000 of those homes would come online for people to live in full time. So this data is preliminary, just sifting through it and trying to say, does this make sense? Does this align with other data that we know? I'm going to give you an example of something that we're sifting through. And if you haven't seen it yet, we will share it with you. But Buncombe County Tax Assessor's Office issued a report fairly recently called Short-Term Rental Highest and Best Use Tax Analysis. And while the focus of the report is not something that is germane to the conversations we're having, the data in the report, which says things like 11% of the housing stock in Buncombe County is, well, and it may be, well, it's somehow an income producing rental. It mentions that there's like over 5,000 active listings for short-term rentals in Buncombe County. And we're checking all of those numbers to see if they make sense and if this is true. The data is important to examine further. Sage.
Well, and I have a data question. Like, is this, it was after Patrick Bowen's slide. This isn't Bowen's information, is it? Like, where's the
This
data
is from
coming
the census. This is from the
census?
ACS.
I remember when, I mean, it's probably pushing up on 10 years when we thought it was 15%. And that was an analysis of the tax, the GIS system and addresses that were receiving bills at alternative addresses. It was like very not not exact data, but this is huge. I mean,
It's huge. And even if it's like, again, it's preliminary, even if it is on the high end, it is worth examining. I think everybody knows there's been a lot of conversation that there are short-term rental units that are coming online in the housing market. And we're seeing, I didn't include some data in here that's really interesting around our number of days on market for single family homes that are on the MLS city. It's going up quite a bit.
it's at 100.
Yeah, so the housing market is changing very rapidly this year, and we really just need to watch it. It could change some of our targets moving forward.
Just one more thought before we jump to Maggie. When we share this kind of information, I mean, this is the tightest budget year we've ever had. The community is very up in arms and concerned. We might want to share a little tidbit says, we're actually not allowed to have a vacancy tax in North Carolina, or, like just some little more information. I know people will immediately think, oh my gosh, make them pay, but we can't. But fascinating data. I look forward to hearing more about it.
Remind me of the total units that we carry. I have it in my head like 45,000 is the units in Asheville.
Almost 49.
35 in the city. It's just over 35,000 of it's about 45. You're correct. 35,000 households, and those are the occupied units. Anything over
like the percentage of this. So you're telling me. So
I'm telling you that it's 0% of that 35 is vacant. It's that additional 15,000 units. So it is almost 50,000 units of housing that we're talking about, and 15,000 of those housing units are vacant, labeled vacant. And so again,
do we have any, this is awesome that we're being able to look at it. My guess is that getting this, what I'm trying to understand is like the over time trajectory. Like, is there any, could you tell us like what it was 5 years ago?
I cannot tell you that, and we're digging into
Okay.
that. Mhm. Okay, let's go to the next slide.
Before you do that, I had my hand raised. I don't know what happened.
Oh,
to
I'm
it.
sorry, I didn't see that, Kim. Apologies.
So a couple of things are coming up. One is there's, a number of stories around Picasso. There's articles on it essentially redefining second home ownership. This is coming up with the Costco membership, where 19,000 members in Western North Carolina have Costco memberships, where Asheville is listed as their primary residence, but it doesn't count the people who have a second home in Asheville and with their primary residence somewhere else. Another place this is coming up is I went to visit Oakland to understand what's going on with their situation. They have 4 vacant apartments for every unhoused neighbor, and trying to figure out what their community-led response is, to figure out, like, is it a second home? Is it a short-term rental? Or is it because a developer, this is coming up in the New York Times article too, builds the units and then it's more cost effective to write off the vacancy as a loss than to drop the cost of the rent. So that's another variable. This is why when I was talking with neighbors in a housing authority neighborhood last weekend, I was not surprised to hear a story again where someone said, they say they have units, I'm applying, but they're not accepting my voucher as payment. Even though they say they accept vouchers, they say they've reached a max. And it's like, well, when you're using a voucher, you're getting paid automatically. So it goes back to, even though we're not allowed to protect against source of income discrimination, we're also not documenting or having a path to show how folks are being discriminated against. So imagine it's not just short-term rentals and it's not just second homes,
That's right.
but it might also be that people are being excluded from signing leases. So in that whole ecosystem, it's probably multiple variables, and it's not uncommon across the country when we're trying to build market rate units and hope they trickle down to the people who need them the most.
Tim, makes me
That's
wonder-
fantastic information.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Go
Kim,
ahead,
that
I'm
makes
sorry.
me wonder if it's particular to the state and what North Carolina laws, like the IRS doesn't allow vacancy to be an itemized deduction or credit towards taxation, but I wonder if the state does. It's interesting. I'd love to see that article if you want to send it to me.
On the next slide. So the next slide, this is just a continuation of that discussion where we, this might look like it's not that different, but it is when you think about what your vacancy rate should be. So you can see areas where they have really, really high vacation ownership, but they have an incentive for people to live there 50% of the year or longer, like Fort Lauderdale. They have lower vacancy rates than ours. Places like Miami and Charlotte, Charleston, even, I think it was like 80, maybe 89%, something like that. Ours is, I put in, Santa Cruz, California, and Flagstaff, Arizona, because they are around 100,000 in population, and they are tourism destinations, but they're not big tourism destinations like New York. Just to try to see, like, what is this anomaly? Is there anybody else that's kind of like where Kim was going, is where else are they experiencing these kind of pressures? But let's move on to the next slide. So more information that we had presented to HCD. So this starts to get into that housing pipeline again that you guys were talking about. So we do parse out from the permitting data with our housing officer and community and economic development, just kind of what that housing pipeline starts to look like. And we need, we'll get back into collating that data for you and providing it in the coming months. But this is from July 2018 to the end of December of last year. So you can see, or it's really probably November, to be honest, but 6,794 units of housing, they're homes, that were approved by city council in that time period through the conditional zoning process. There are plenty of other units of housing that didn't come to you, but we're just going to look at those. And we're going to assume that most of those are for rent homes, even though it's possible that some of those are condos. Usually conditional zonings are for rent. So that's the number of homes, 4,239, that again, we looked into and said, have they actually been built? Have they pulled a permit to do grading? If we call them, will they say that they're still interested and they will build it? So all in, about 60% of what you actually approved might be built from what we know. And then the number of residential conditional zoning projects, not units, but projects that were approved during that time that included affordability investment from the city, housing trust fund or otherwise, that's about 35%. 16 out of 46 of those projects had affordability in them, but 87% of those are actually viable, what we're calling viable. And the takeaway here is that we really feel strongly that the investments that the city is making in affordability mean that a developer has a higher probability of going to market with those units. And it's something to take very seriously. So good job, council. Next slide.
Steph, I wonder if we'll see a decline in that since we have abandoned some of our housing programs and now we've outsourced our kind of housing loan program. But like the demise of Luigi comes to mind. I hope we bring those things back, by the way.
Kim?
Yeah, I was trying to wait for the question since we're not doing that. Can you go back a slide? So I hear you saying that 87% of the conditional zoning projects are viable. And how many of them have taken the first step? So I think of like the Fuddruckers on Charlotte Street, where there was a building producing revenue, sales tax revenue, and now it's, devaluing the property because that building's gone. Like, how close is that, like, to getting off the ground? And I don't mean to pick on one. There's so many. We have major commercial properties that have been sitting on property, allowing it to devalue all over the city. Whether it's former hotel buildings or former grocery stores or former malls. So I'm just kind of curious, like, they're viable, but have they started moving?
So what I'm hearing from both of you, Council Person Turner and Council Person Roney, is just looking at the impact of the city's investments, current, and any kind of change in our investment strategy and affordability, how that may impact production and the number of units and our overall affordability, and then also taking a look at for the projects you might be more interested to see. And I wanted to just make one clarification. Not 80%, 7% of the conditional zonings are moving forward. 87% of the conditional zonings that have affordability and it's city investment in particular are moving forward. But the
So
question
14 of the 16 above. So there's 46 and 14 are viable. So in column 4 going down, it says 16/46, so about 35%
have the
include
affordability.
And 14 of those 16 are viable. So
Yes.
where's the other 65% of CZ? That's like a missing bar. Are they
Yeah,
not
so you're
viable?
saying what this, what I'm saying is, no, what I'm saying is that this other 65% did not include a city affordability percentage. So it's not saying that they're not viable. What we're saying is actually 60% of the projects that are being approved or the units are like viable. But that's not,
Right,
I mean,
and I
that's
saw
not
that. No, I saw that at HCD, but what's
Yeah.
missing is like, are the 60% who didn't receive some sort of subsidy breaking ground? Are they stuck?
Anecdotally, many are saying that they cannot get the financing they need, and the interest rates are too high, and the cost of materials are too high. And it's more of a conversation because it seems to me that every project is a little different. Some are just literally not able to take the first step without financing and capital stack figured out. Well, I heard, and this is all anecdotal, but I've been told that a lot of private financing is involved and the criteria is harder and it changes some of the makeup. So when we have some of our codes and desires to build commercial on the bottom with residential above, it's a different kind of loan package. It's harder to get, and the financing for that is harder to get. So there's a myriad of reasons. It's a great thing for a developers forum to really hammer out with literal input instead of us kind of pulling data from random places and just hear from the real reasons why they're not.
I'm going to speak really plainly about why I've been asking this question and asking for more data. Because we have some very tight timelines around our CDBGR funds, but also our bond funds, my curiosity is if some of the market rate units that have been through design, been through the zoning questions, been through TRC, but they're stuck on just the financing, what would make it possible for us to come in under the wire in time? Is it possible that some of these projects could be expedited? And that's the intent, for me to better understand who's getting stuck and why, and if there's a real solution that meets the timeline to get better outcomes, especially if it results in affordability. And I'm not talking about 80% AMI. I'm talking about really intentionally at that low income. Like, how do we build housing on purpose for our neighbors? And if a project's already gone through every single design review and the funding is really the problem and it's not in the flood zone, then is there a way to expedite?
So Kim, just so I understand, so you're saying like what that could look like, this curiosity of yours would be like, we might go back to some of the folks that we've already permitted that are stuck and kind of invite them to make a proposal if they would offer much more deeply affordable housing to get their project over to the finish line, and we could look to bond and DR money for that purpose. So instead of our typical approach with these monies, which is a new project comes to us, to double back on projects already in the pipeline.
Yeah, especially because I was watching Housing Community Development this morning, and that conversation around, are we going to move out of multifamily into home repairs?
Mhm.
Really, truly, we need both, right? So in my curiosity around this timeline, if it's like, oh, well, the home repairs is going to move fast enough to get the timeliness factor. Well, is it possible that a project's gone through so much of the design review that we could get it done in 6 years? Because I want to know what the return on investment looks like for us
Yeah.
to reopen the weeds, but at 50% AMI, right?
Yeah. And it's fundamentally saying like, we look at a lot of our incentives fundamentally as getting more into the pipeline, and the goal could be getting them through the pipeline. And if that's what we're asking for from a council, then how we set up the program completely changes, because it's no longer like, bring us your idea of a project. That's interesting. I really appreciate you bringing that thought. I don't know what that implications of doing
And I
that
want to make
we're thinking about.
I want to make data informed decisions too, which is why the conversation that's been having at HCD and missing the AHAC pipeline, those are variables that help me make a better decision about CDBGDR and housing bond funds. Because I don't like, I'm not gonna just throw money at something that's in the floodplain. I want to know, like, if it meets design and it's safe, then it's a good long-term investment. But the missing numbers will help me make a better decision.
Kim, I just want to quickly echo that I love the idea and the concept. I think it makes sense to revisit. You know, I mentioned the capital stack financing as a problem before. When we layer in a deed restriction, which is usually what comes with a council infusion of funding, it's just a different project too. But maybe some of them would be willing to convert their whole model to do such. It's totally worth talking about. I appreciate the idea.
Yeah, and I mean, if our goal as council isn't the how, and we're going to start both a UDO update and strategic planning with our new city manager, if our goal is really the vision and the how, we fundamentally have an implied goal of getting things into the beginning of the pipeline. But if we just say like get them through the end of the pipeline very explicitly, it just makes me wonder how, and like, does that creatively spin it? What a good conversation. Thanks, everybody.
One last thought too is like, if we know this, one of the reasons we did that transition to the corridor upzoning kind of thing and made it easier to get through the council part of it if you created the things we liked, this is an argument for us to do that across the city, because we have a couple factors that are also preventing projects coming to us, which is just the hardship of coming to council, right? But the more we can prescribe the process, the more likely some of these kind of temporarily dead in the water projects will also be able to get on board. The prescription is what's missing, and we're not really offering a solid prescription. And this is, to me, this conversation lends to more of what we did with the transportation corridors throughout the city.
I'm going to try to take these last
All right.
slides pretty quickly. So let's go.
I know I was about timing. This is 100% worth it. That's really more like a government strategy we're going to try out.
That's great. I actually, I got to say, hearing you all discuss these things is really helpful for us as well. So these are just a couple slides to talk about recent growth and the different ways that we're thinking about them. So, this is not complete data, but we were just looking at new builds and the numbers. So this is kind of 2 years of numbers, and we do have ADUs, detached ADUs, new ones listed on here. It's not a huge number, but you can see duplexes. We had 12 in there. Just one way of kind of just looking at what we're really seeing people doing. And I'm sorry, but the SFD, we're talking about single family. And for folks out there, like, single families are still a lot of the bread and butter. Let's go to the next slide. So I wanted to share this. I thought it was interesting. We were just looking at different data that was available from our departments. I had never seen the water department service boundary before. So this is not the same boundary as the city of Asheville. The city of Asheville is in gray. And then you can see like our water system obviously serves a much larger area. We are in many communities, the greater Asheville area. But this was a map that one of the data analysts in water showed me that just kind of show the new infrastructure that's being put in, basically water mains and water infrastructure. And it helps you just visualize, even just by looking at this, you can see there's a lot of dark spots in the western area. And that a lot of these dark spots, really, when people are moving to Asheville, they're not moving to Asheville. So let's look at the next slide. The next slide, I thought there was one more slide. Perhaps it got lost. Is there a slide after this? Maybe they got jumbled. Okay, no. So I'm just going to talk through, if you go back one slide. What's not showing here, and I'm not sure how it got dropped off, but there is a graphic that shows this area divided into quadrants, and you can absolutely take a look at the different quadrants of the city and see that by far the south and the west are the areas that are growing. So if anybody had any questions, it is the south and west, and it's data proves it out 100%. Councilwoman Turner.
This might be more of a Ben question from his recollection. Am I recalling correctly that we cannot charge a different water rate for customers outside the city?
Correct.
Just
Or at high
there is
elevation.
an argument for it. Our poor residents are seeing fee increases to support external customers.
No, it's all paid for by ratepayers. So if you're an external customer, you're a ratepayer. If you're a non-city resident, you're a ratepayer.
Right. But all the cost, all the infrastructure, all the use it all adds up. We are taking care of a larger community than our own. I get that they're paying their water bills.
Yeah, yeah,
But-
yeah.
Asheville's probably one of the few cities in the state that isn't able to charge differential water rates. It's pretty common in other places. So typically people outside the city limits will pay 1.5 to double times the city resident rate for water.
I'm hearing legislative agenda item.
Well, this is also why for years I was harping on it until we had a consultant and a study that showed that hole in the middle that was receiving a 50% discount for the water rate, why that needed to be fixed. And so this is year 3 that we're looking at achieving more equitable water rate across the board, right? But it doesn't mean that we have a plan beyond that.
Just a quick reminder, that comes from the Sullivan Acts, which were local bills that were put on Asheville years ago. So yes, it's something that could be addressed.
So lastly, and I'm actually gonna ask for your grace here, and we're not going to demonstrate it. I'm just going to explain to you what this is, because we could probably spend another half hour just on this, and maybe I'll come back next month and share it with you and you can look at it in the meantime. But we have a interactive map viewer now that is showing all development applications, and we're moving towards finding ways to increase our accessibility for our residents and businesses, for them to see what actually is going on and have that transparent. And there are layers in there that we are going to disclaimer, of course, with the data, but that show different types of applications that have been applied for, like proposals, versus what has been built. And so you can literally see in a geographic distribution of where proposals had wanted to go and where proposals actually built. And it might be not 100% correct. We're coming through some of that data, but it is enough for you to think about general trends. You can have moderate confidence in this data. And then the data also includes a layer where you can put in the 7F parcels. And the 7F parcels, again, the definition of that are parcels that council had deemed more vulnerable to displacement, and adopted a list of parcels that are in or around legacy neighborhoods or had been identified through the missing middle anti-displacement analysis, as from a database perspective as being more vulnerable. So you can take a look at all of this, see if there's anything of interest in there that you would like for us to dig into. And if you guys want, we can have somebody, myself included, come and do a little bit of a demo, but we are at 2 o'clock. So thank you very much. Do you all have any final questions for myself or Chris, who's going to be presenting next?
I think let's keep moving.
Thank you so much.
Very timely as we go into the UDO to understand, like, what are the goals? What do we want
One
to?
question.
Yeah, go first.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I just really felt this was critical. When we're looking at 30% vacant homes, residences, we are saying the short-term rentals are within that, or they are separate because they are rented sometimes.
They're within that. Anything that is where someone might not be there. So it's not that 30% of them are short-term rentals, but a percentage of those are going to be including
But we are
short-term
grouping
rentals.
them in. Okay.
It is not include, so this is not including homestays, and I think that's kind of important. And we'll talk more about that, but yeah,
Thank you.
let's find that further.
All right. Oh, wait, no, should I move on to the agenda? Hold on. Yes, because we're moving on to the agenda item technically. Yes. Thank you for agenda item number 2. What a great discussion. So we'll move on to agenda item number 3, which is a proposal to update the comp plan and UDO from Chris Collins.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Chris Collins with the Planning and Urban Design Department. And as you stated, that really is a good segue into talking about what we're going to be doing with the comprehensive plan update and the UDO update, trying to align the vision that we tried to establish with Living Asheville with action in our development regulations and a huge effort at resiliency within there. So the goals of this presentation right now, by the time we're done, I want everyone to be able to understand why this and why now, right? Why are we updating these plans and why is now the right time? A very specific review of where we are in the process. It is a longer process than a lot of us want it to be, but it's important to understand where we are, what our exact task in front of us is at this next milestone, and the scope of that task. A discussion of the overall timeline of the project. I did want to highlight what we know right now about anticipated outcomes once we get this going, and spend some time looking at what we have done with the Planning and Zoning Commission so far and what role we anticipate to work with them on moving forward. So next slide. So talking about why these updates are necessary. Okay, so some fun facts here. Development regulations, our UDO was adopted in 1997. So we're coming up on close to 30 years with that set of regulatory guidance. Our comprehensive plan was adopted 7 years ago in 2018. We did not make as a city, a concerted effort to update those development regulations after that. And we've had a lot of, well, many cases of conflict and inconsistencies in our development regulations. And in some cases, they're kind of possibly even blocking some of the outcomes our comp plan calls for. And through that 29, close to 30 years, we have amended that UDO 297 times. That might be 298. I can't remember if that number came before or after March, but we're getting very close to 300. We have had also since 2018 a lot of other recent plans and studies that we have undertaken that definitely have interplay with the concepts and goals in the comprehensive plan, but there hasn't been a lot of interplay or adoption between the two. We do have available Helene recovery funding to work with now to focus on getting the resiliency elements in particular in place in our UDO where they need to be on our lessons learned from what's happened. And, you know, that leads well into another reason we've had a lot of changes since 2018. You know, the whole world saw COVID, the economic impacts, the development impacts. Then we locally saw Helene and everything else that's gone on since then. So we've seen massive changes in demographics, development patterns, storm impacts, and things like that since 1997 for sure, right? But even more so since 2018. Okay, next slide, please. All right, so first, just a real quick nod to what we anticipate the comp plan update being. This slide titles it a data refresh. I don't want people to go into this expecting a comprehensive plan rewrite, a brand new comprehensive planning effort. We are only 7 years into our comprehensive plan, and while a lot has happened, that is generally not the horizon for rewriting your comprehensive plan. So what you're likely to see here is not an anticipated change to the core goals that were adopted in 2018, but a technical and data-driven refresh where we can update our population numbers, trend numbers, development data numbers, environmental changes and environmental data. Look at the need to refine any land use technical maps, such as the future land use map, and work to accommodate newer plans and studies, things that have come to be since 2018, such as the affordable housing plan, information gained through the missing middle housing study, and even more tangential things like parks master plans, a gap plan, things like that. All the while anticipating that we're going to stick with consistent 2018 community goals moving forward. Next slide, please. The other big part of this, and really a meatier chunk of this, is updating the UDO and the development regulations. That is anticipated to be more of a whole-scale rewrite or redrafting of these regulations. And we talk about the UDO a lot, but dominoes fall when things are connected. This is also going to include taking a look at the city's standard details and specifications manual and design design guidelines as they connect to our land use regulations. The goals here are what we anticipate we'll be looking at a high level is aligning the requirements for physical development with the goals of the comprehensive plan, simplifying the city's zoning and other development regulations, and we'll talk a little more why that's a goal for us, and really targeting specific goals from our comprehensive plan to further in the built environment, things that we know we need to address, such as housing production, resiliency, sustainability, and mobility as it relates to multimodal transit service, providing development along the right corridors and such. Next slide, please. So what does this look like? This is a super broad timeline at this point in the project. And I want to start by talking about we are here, which really that arrow should move over a little bit because it's no longer January. But staff has been working on this for honestly probably before July of 2025, but that's where we decided to start on this timeline, trying to get ready to find out where funding sources will be coming from, get the grant applications written and done, and start preparing for our next goal, which is the release of an RFP, request for proposals. We are putting a request for proposals out to seek out assistance for staff to carry out this project and put together the right team with the right expertise to make this happen. So we anticipate right now, the important date, we are still on target to release that request for proposals on February 27th, which is getting closer every day. We're going through interagency and interdepartmental review right now of these documents, trying to get all the I's dotted and T's crossed. And that would move us towards, excuse me, an April 1st submission deadline, reviewing these. The main goal here is that we would like to have a contract ready to go to get this project started for the upcoming fiscal year. So that's where we are right now. That's what our concerted efforts are on right now. And that's kind of, I just want to make sure and keep the focus on that. Let's see, let me pause for a second. Councilwoman Roney.
Thank you, Chris. I was sensing a like pause in your tempo and timbre. So I had some curiosity because we're moving this forward, but we don't have updated flood maps yet. Are y'all talking about how that fits into the equation?
We definitely will be right now at this RFP stage. We're going to work off of what we have, and the flood regulations as they appear in our UDO are going to apply to areas that are mapped to a certain zone. So if the flood maps do update, it will change the extent of what's regulated, but not the content necessarily, if that makes sense. So we feel pretty comfortable being able to move forward.
Okay. And then because we adopted a stated climate emergency in 2020, and I saw resiliency and sustainability on a slide, what are some of the like high level ways that we could use a UDO rewrite to achieve different outcomes when it comes to like our climate vulnerability index mapping? Are we folding that map into our factors?
Yes, well, we're going to be asking our team to look at all of our available resources to get us there. And there's a huge focus on resiliency and sustainability for obvious reasons and for financial reasons. These grants really need to be applied to that. But we will talk a little more about that in anticipated outcomes in just a few slides.
Okay. And then my third question was, I know that Durham was doing their UDO rewrite in partnership with their county. So because there's, issues that the boundaries are maybe an opportunity for collaboration instead of isolation. Is there any talk about working with the county together?
I think it's very important. And in fact, it's even stated in the goal of our comprehensive plan that we're looking to implement. And I will say that the county right now has recently come off the heels of adopting their first comprehensive plan. And they're working on strategic zoning amendments at the moment to implement that themselves. So I would anticipate that some collaboration there just get our edge zones right, to get our development trends and patterns right, is going to be a necessary thing we do.
I appreciate that.
Sure.
And I think Durham and the Durham City and County are a consolidated government, I believe, or at least some of their functions are. So that could also be some of the facilitation there, is that they kind of function together. The question I had is that, as I recall, talking about UDO rewrites before the storm, and we were looking at a path that did this in-house. The staff's recommendation at that time was to pursue a path that involved batching recommendations. So what I see here is a planning period and then a review and adopt period. And I really, that makes me concerned. We did a very long planning period with missing middle, and we have yet to really adopt the heart of that. So it makes me a little uncomfortable that we might go through a really long process without maintaining leadership decision-making through the process. So my question is, what would it take for us to have an approach that's more batched and that decision-making is happening iteratively as opposed to delayed?
Sure, that's a really good question. I think we remain, open to smaller amendments that need to happen along the way. That's the easy part of the question. In talking to, we've talked to a lot of other jurisdictions. We have the benefit of having some of our larger jurisdictions in the state having just gone through this. So we've been able to interview those folks and talk about what's gone on. Most traditionally, when you're doing a full rewrite, you do look to do an official adoption at once because there are a lot of interdependencies within the code. It can be very difficult to make those work if you try to stagger the adoption, because you would still be working with new concepts on a new thing that are relying on concepts that may not exist in another section, or it may increase the size of a batch that has to be done. I'm not saying that we would rule out or totally recommend against that right now. Most indicators are that it would be a difficult thing to do with a full rewrite, but it's certainly something we're willing to investigate.
So talk to me more about what's different now than when staff recommended us doing batches before, because it took a while to get that buy-in, and it was like, here's the plan, and we struggled to even get motion on it, but that was very much the recommendation before. So why has that changed?
The approach before really was based on not having the opportunity to rewrite this code. I'm just going to be pretty blatant with that. We said these are the resources we have available. We can do this piecemeal. We can keep amending. We can get this UDO amendment count up higher than 297 and try and hit some of our goals. Now, like outlined in an earlier slide, we have an opportunity to bring this code into line with our comprehensive plan and where we want to be. So that's really what we're aiming to do now, because we had the opportunity. Before, we had limited resources and limited abilities to do this.
Yeah. So it was a bit more piecemeal, and we would have run into the conflicts that you're talking about. But if we can do it more comprehensively, staff's recommendations, it'll be better outcomes.
Definitely. We definitely think it will be better outcomes.
Well, I hate planning for something that council may never adopt, because that seems like our habit. But that's an us problem, not a staff problem. And this is just so important for our community's future. I was going to ask something too. Oh, another thing that I'd be curious about, the expertise that you're going to be bringing in, if it's in their capacity to advise on, is, again, looking at Raleigh, their equivalent to our committee just basically does rolling updates to their UDO. And maybe that's where they are in the stage of their UDO's integrity or health or whatever. But it just is like, it's not this wait 25, 30 years and then do it all at once. It's like, it's a program within the planning department almost, to just have a living, breathing update as council's goals sharpen. And again, maybe that doesn't fit in this analysis, but I'd be curious if they're looking, I'm sure they're going to be looking at the policy and then our capacity as staff to execute that. I'd be curious about that. I think it would be very interesting if this group this committee functioned as living, breathing directors and evolutionary leaders of the UDO, as opposed to us, advocating for these big bursts of updates. So that's doesn't need an answer, but that's more maybe a thought for my peers of how other communities are handling that. Communities evolve, and I don't want us to wait 30 years again to do this. So thanks.
I'm guessing that's why we saw that slide that said we've updated it 267 or 268 times. So we do roll it and change it as things happen. Now, yeah, I agree with several of your points. One is, excuse me, one is that if we were stronger and more unified as a council in our objectives, staff would certainly deploy it. But we have made it like this. But it makes me wonder, like, speaking of the delay and this taking, all the justified time it does. I mean, it's a huge process. Some cities probably spend more time than 2 years. But what if we did a both and we picked back up with the missing middle? I mean, I'm following the campaign trail. We have a lot of candidates out there. Everyone is saying missing middle, missing middle. Like, why don't we reactivate what we were working on while this third party company also does this on the side, and they get blended? That way we're not dead in the water on a council in the midst of a housing crisis, and the UDO is getting written in what is, I agree, a better way, a comprehensive review. I mean, chapters touch chapters. It can be messy, but I don't want us to do nothing. I would absolutely support bringing back a lot of the missing middle kind of momentum we had and do that piece alongside this.
I would say even not alongside this. I'd like to do that before this. I'd like
Now, yeah.
As the chair, I was sitting with staff 2 weeks ago looking at our agendas for the coming spring, and we have capacity as a committee to really look at what anti-displacement measures we could look at in tandem with missing middle. And I would love us to do that this spring, so that as we're starting the comp plan, we have council's vision, we have direction that the public has been telling us for a long time that they want. And that's a before, because the alternative is it gets rolled into this plan and we don't do any of that till 2028. That feels like I'm not serving the people that elected me. That feels like a culture of delay that just doesn't feel right. So I would really love us as a council, as a committee, to start digging into that. Now, I think HCD might have a really good role to play in looking at some of the anti-displacement measures. Maybe that's a better place for that conversation as we look at the missing middle and it's considered for adoption in tandem. That would be something I really am hearing from the community a demand to do. I think that we've had these are complicated things to address. How do we address housing supply while not displacing our neighbors? And I don't think any community has it down clearly. And so us deliberating and working through the tension for the last year since the storm, I think makes sense. And I just am hearing so clearly that it's a both and, that it's not an either or, that we don't choose one or the other, that we do both at the same time. So that would really be my preference. My understanding is, or my thought is, that we really need to have that conversation as a full council. I wouldn't want us as a trio to just start scheduling this on the PED agenda until the full council can really discuss, like, are we ready finally to do a both and which committees are going to dig into the anti-displacement, which are going to dig into the missing middle. But I mean, I would love to do that right now. So, I'm asking our city manager of when can we have that council conversation? And if that's of interest to y'all, I ask you to ask her as well, so that we could get something like that scheduled.
I'm in support of that. Even with, like, we recently did the ADU updates, but it was such a shrunken version of the updates. Like, there's just been so many things that staff have done great work on. Perhaps we need to revisit in light of this $30 million gap, changes in atmosphere, interest rates, ability to get projects built,
Kim, curious what your thoughts are on pursuing those both and solutions this spring.
raised my hand.
Okay.
So maybe staff could give an update on where conversations are, because the legacy neighborhoods are volunteering their time to bring forward solutions that benefit the whole community. Where are we at with the recommendations? Because anti-displacement could look like a lot of different things. And yeah, it would just help if I knew where staff was at on understanding what is implementable.
Go ahead, Ben. Sorry.
Well, I'll try to answer that one. We have had some meetings with legacy neighborhood representatives, and we actually have a meeting this week to kind of discuss next steps for staff. So I would think in the coming, I'm going to say weeks, give us a little bit of time, that we should have more information from council on progress and, I think both and are entirely possible and doable. We've just got to put together internally kind of a team and resources and kind of program our work around that. So also to your point, Councilman Ullman, I do know that our manager, DK Wesley, is planning to come to full council with more information. So I think all the questions you're asking, we don't have the answers today, but we're working to get those, and we'll be back in front of council soon with kind of what next steps could look like.
That's really helpful because I think the missing middle housing study has been getting a lot of attention and support, but the displacement risk assessment, not necessarily so much. So it would help to know what we're actually talking about and which parts we're ready to move forward on. I do agree that it should come to the full council for review.
All right, let's keep rolling, Chris.
All right. Great conversation. We get good info from that. We could go back to that timeline slide real quick, Katie. One thing I just wanted to point out that we are trying to speed this up as much as possible by getting this overlap between comprehensive plan update and development regulations going on. It's just something I wanted to make sure was visible on this slide. We've heard from Charlotte, Durham, Gaston County that they did this and it's achievable, so we're pushing forward as well. Next slide. So RFP scope elements, there's a lot going on in this RFP that's under draft right now. These are 4 things I wanted to highlight. We're highlighting a lot to the folks that we're asking to respond to this, but we are calling out specifically areas of communication, community engagement and mediation. Looking for someone who can come to the table skilled at kind of balancing competing priorities, priorities around neighborhood protection and housing production and things like that. Of course, there's the comprehensive plan update, the regulatory framework, the UDO rewrite, and the technical manuals and design guidelines. Next slide. Actually, next one after that. We're going to skip over that one so we can keep going. All right, I'm going to go real fast through these 2. I just wanted real quick to kind of reintroduce the structure of the comprehensive plan moving into this, but because it's been a while since 2018, council's changed a bit, but the comprehensive plan establishes a community vision by breaking things into themes, such as the livable built environment, healthy community, resilient economy, interwoven equity, harmony with the natural environment, and responsible regionalism. And next slide. Beyond that, it goes into things like background and key ideas, but really the meat of it that you're going to see as we go through this will be the themes of the comprehensive plan, and at the bottom of this graphic, the goals. Next slide. And this is just to give everyone an example of how that interplays. We have a theme of a livable built environment, for instance, and within that we have all these goals. And just to call out a few that we've actually worked with recently are increasing mixed use development along transit corridors, looking to try and do that, and making streets more walkable, comfortable, and connected. We've done that both through ordinances and staff efforts at streetscape planning and things like that for development. Next slide. All right, so one purpose I wanted to talk about and feedback I heard at the Planning and Zoning Commission retreat where we dug into this was what kind of outcomes are we anticipating? And what I want to tell you all first is that we are at the RFP point. We are open to learning a lot more about what outcomes we're anticipating and working towards. But right now, we anticipate that the updates will, at a minimum, of course, focus on enabling housing production and incentivizing affordable housing, prioritizing and incentivizing resilient, sustainable development. And as staff in our work with the development community, the general public, and with the Planning and Zoning Commission, we've really identified a need for really accessible and user-friendly plan and regulations to come out of this. Next slide. All right, and so what we've been able to do before coming to you is get things kicked off as far as working with the Planning and Zoning Commission. And there will be a lot of stakeholders involved in this process. I'm highlighting the Planning and Zoning Commission now because that is the group that has to review everything and make a recommendation to council per our ordinances, right? And state statute. So that's where we're starting with them. We did focus most of their most recent retreat or work session on January 28th on working with this upcoming UDO and comp plan update. And this is just some of the things we heard from them, right? We looked to kind of establish what their priorities were or what they thought was important moving into it, or to see how does that match up with what staff has got going on, and what are they going to be looking for as they review these. And you'll see in front of you, you know, we asked for things that were outcome and content related. We of course heard a lot about housing related and housing supportive policy. Enabling density and affordability, incentivizing sustainable practices and resiliency. There's a strong emphasis from that group on expanding by right development and incorporating anti-displacement strategies, which we've already talked a little bit about today, or I've heard some conversation about. Strong priority focus was shown on floodplain and stormwater management, which is great because that's right in line with the fact that we need to really enhance resiliency with these updates. And then, as I made reference to in the last slide, we did hear a lot about a desire for clarity, navigability, and quick and easy to digest user graphics, guides, brochures, and focus things such as that. And a priority was shown for equitable engagement that promotes public buy-in with a focus on folks who may have not been as always as involved in these situations as we'd like them to be, right? So a lot of that lines up with our comprehensive plan priorities and also what we anticipated, but it was really good to get this information from Planning and Zoning Commission. Councilwoman Ullman.
Yeah, can you go, there's just a lot of words and I'm listening and reading. I recall, because I was there as a liaison, that there was a high priority to make sure that as we're looking at housing supply, we're also looking at anti-displacement. I must have lost that. Is that here somewhere? Did I not hear that? Sorry if I zoned out.
You did hear it, and this is a wordy slide, but under implement, let's see. Hold on, now I lost it.
It's under the second bullet point on this page. Also noted as a priority and related to housing, there was strong support for anti-displacement strategies and programming. We haven't really outlined what they are yet.
Yeah, that was definitely, and we took them through. Us planners, we love the sticky dot exercises. So of course we made our Planning and Zoning Commission participate in one of those, and that's where most of these insights came from.
Great. This is helpful. I appreciate you reporting it out to us. I mean, this is such a critical commission to guide us in this and to collaborate with us. And as I look at this sounds like what I hear when I talk to council peers. So I feel like this is a good stake in the ground to make sure we keep moving forward.
All right, next slide. And I just have the timeline up again. That is the end of my presentation for today and open for questions.
I think we did a nice job of kind of Q&A as we went. When's the next time we'll hear from you? I guess after you guys, or when do you anticipate, if you're putting the RFP out 10 days from now, what's your target timeline for selecting a firm?
Excuse me. So in detail, we're going to try and we're still on target to get it out on the 27th. Yep, 10 days from now. It does keep getting closer. We anticipate closing that and having all responses in by April 1st. And at which point we go through a pretty detailed review process of those responses. And we don't know how many we'll get, obviously. But we do have to go through the procurement processes and some more detailed processes related to using HMGP or CDBG-DR funds. So we'll go through that process. Our ultimate goal is to have a contract signed by the fiscal year, but that's us putting an outside boundary on it. We'd really like to be bringing a contract to council for this in late May.
Cool. Great. I had another thought, especially as we're rolling towards this this RFP and bringing on some support before we move on to the CPACE agenda item. It has been a really long time. I'm curious if anyone knows when we last did a developer forum. I think that things are so different right now, post-storm, post-Helene, financing changes, inflation costs, that is something, again, we talked about before Helene and had started to talk about scheduling, that I think, and it doesn't just have to be for developers, it can be a development forum, but that's something that I'd really like to see, and would welcome other electeds if that's something that Sage or Kim, you're interested in co-hosting. I think we could put that together. You know, there's rooms that we could rent. We know folks to invite. I'm sure we could ask staff if they had a list of people to invite, but I don't mind putting in the elbow grease to create a space to listen. So if anyone wants to collaborate with me on that, I'd love to do that. And of course, you know, if we can pull that together, staff, we'd really love your data to share out in that conversation. But I think part of our role as council is to listen and to understand that it doesn't need to be staff planning a 75-hour planning process for an event. I think council could take the helm and just open up our space, just like, you know, I do town halls regularly. You know, I think that it's part of constituent services. So I would love to collaborate with other electeds on that.
Maggie, I'm thinking it's been 5, 6, 7 years. And it was, I mean, I think staff actually did a smaller one where they grouped developers recently and got some input, I thought. But the developer forum I was referring to in the past was like over at, I think it was at UNC Asheville one year. And it was Land of Sky was involved, the Realtors Association. It was like a bigger ordeal that we were a part of, I think. I wasn't involved in the planning, so I don't know all the semantics. I would attend it though. And there were different rooms of different conversations, different groups of stakeholders giving different types of input. And that's kind of what I'm wondering about. That's a much bigger thing. But as far as like this set of data we got today about development stuck in the pipeline, not being able to get built, that's a smaller undertaking that we could talk about. And maybe the UDO process of being overhauled will kind of have a similar feeling as a development forum and meeting with the communities and understanding that kind of stuff. But for now, if we really wanted to like get some action going and get some of these projects going, Kim's idea of reaching out to them, the idea you're talking about could really happen pretty simply. I would happily sit in a room and just talk to people. I don't know how that can translate into good data necessarily, but I'm all for it. We need to do it. I feel responsible to do it.
All right. Any other thoughts on, it's extremely thoughtful PEDE so far. Thanks everybody, staff pulling this all together, teeing it up, all the great work, Chris, to get this UDO prepped. We've all been rowing in the same direction for a while, and it feels like we're really starting to surf some waves, and I'm thankful and proud of the work and hopeful. Okay, let's move on to another thing I'm super excited about that Kira Boulan is going to share. A bit wonky, but super high impact is CPACE.
Good afternoon, Councilwoman. Wonky, I don't know about that. This is some good news stories here. I'm Kira Boulan, the Interim Sustainability Director. And I also want to note that I'm joined on the call by so many colleagues, but including Rachel Taylor, the city's Economic Development Division Manager, who's going to have a key role in connecting this exciting opportunity to our local businesses and commercial property owners. Next slide, please, Katie. Let's start with the key takeaways. We're going to be talking about the Commercial Property Assessed Capital Expenditure Program, heretofore known as CPACE, so that I don't have to get you with that long name again and again throughout this short presentation. This is an exciting new tool in our local toolbox. It's going to help support commercial property owners and developers in pursuing long-term private financing that supports specific property enhancements. The designated eligible projects include things like renewable energy, energy efficiency, water conservation projects, and resilience initiatives, again, on commercial property. Local action is required at the municipal level. I'm going to get a little bit more into some of the nuts and bolts later in the presentation to allow for participation in this statewide program. The resolution of intent, public hearing, and the resolution to participate have all been completed at the Buncombe County level already by the county commissioners, making this program active throughout the county already, including the city of Asheville. In the coming slides, I'm going to share a little bit more detail about what the program is and background, and looking for your support today to advance supportive resolution at City Council. Next slide, please. So here's some background. There was a bill that passed in the North Carolina Senate, Senate Bill 802, that was ratified in July of 2024, that established this statewide CPACE, or Commercial Property Assessed Capital Expenditure Program. After passage at the state level, as I already mentioned, this action is required at the local level. That's all happened. All of the phases have been completed by their February 3rd meeting. So this happened at the county, jumped through the required hoops that resulted from the Senate bill action. It's a statewide voluntary program, so this provides access to private financing mechanisms for these kind of designated commercial, industrial, or multifamily programs. And multifamily in this instance is defined as 5 or more units. And these could be property upgrades, this could be new construction, and there's some more detail on some program eligibility a little later in the presentation. The financing, this is an important part. The financing is repaid through a special assessment or lien on the property tax bill. So it's repaid over a long-term period, 30 plus years, or the length of the property investment. And so it's a really great opportunity for these investments to be made at a time, and with removing some of those barriers for financing for our commercial property owners. The program is active in 40 states. North Carolina and Georgia are some of the most recent adopters. And the program priorities include things like support for economic development by sort of spurring and providing tools and opportunities for making these investments in commercial property. And of course, the specifics of those kinds of investments that are covered by this financing, like renewable energy efficiency upgrades, resilience, and conservation projects. And these can really be anything from HVAC system enhancements to electric vehicle charging infrastructure to new high efficiency windows, full building renovations, large scale efficiency upgrades, solar on rooftops. Lots of different kinds of projects can be covered. But I do want to kind of reiterate, which you can see on the right of your screen here, that these are large scale commercial financing. The average loan in 2024 nationally was $11 million. So these are big investments in those categories. Next slide, please. I'm going to talk a little bit in our next slide about roles and responsibilities. I've alluded to this a little bit. This is a program through the state, and there's an implementation partner at the state, the Economic Development Partnership of North Carolina, or EDPNC, and the program sponsor at the state level is the North Carolina Department of Commerce. So EDPNC shoulders the majority of the administrative duties with actually making these finance tools work, both for the commercial property owners and for the financiers. There are some administrative duties that will be supported through Buncombe County as the lien holder. So they have some administrative responsibility to the program. The city of Asheville, aside from our important role in promoting and supporting this program, does not have administrative duty related to the project. Commercial project owners are going to pursue the private capital. They will be supported through EDPNC through the process. And of course, the capital providers act as they normally do, providing funds, managing billing, collecting via the lien mechanism, again, with support from EDPNC to make sure that we're dotting all the I's and crossing the T's. As I mentioned, the city doesn't have any formal role or responsibility, but Rachel and I, in collaboration with our colleagues at the county and of course our communications team, are going to do our very best to make sure that our development and commercial property owners are aware of this opportunity and connected to the resources that they need through the state, through the EDPNC, and through the county. Next slide, please. there's a lot of benefits here. So I'm going to level up a couple that are not exactly on this slide in terms of indirectness. They're key benefits for multiple stakeholders across the spectrum. Some of the community-wide benefits that are implied but not explicitly stated, so I want to be sure to lift them up, are the benefits of the green economy development, job creation development within this green economy. So thinking about how we're continuing to lift this up without use of local government funds. So this is a really strong partnership where we can say, how do we leverage private financing to build the green economy that we want for our community here in the now, and of course, being able to continue to expand that into the future. And of course, in addition to that, the enhanced overall community resilience, reduced emissions that are going to result from expanding our renewable energy portfolio into private and commercial property owners, water conservation, energy efficiency adoption. These have enormous community-wide impacts. And so we're just excited to see more ways for our community members to tap into resources to pay for putting those enhancements on their projects or building them in from the get-go when we're looking at new developments, if we have tools to be able to support the financing. Of course, these come alongside some really great terms and opportunities for our commercial property owners as well. Some of those include 100% long-term, so up to 20 to 30 years. These are fixed rate, non-recourse financing, meaning the lender can't pursue personal property in the event of lien default. So starting to get a little bit wonky here, but these are good terms for our commercial property owners. The financing for these projects are really reliable and they can be spread out over long term of these investments, and there's transferability upon sale. So again, as a developer, as we're thinking about making these investments and we're planning to sell the property to a different commercial property operator in the long run, that these liens are transferable upon property. So good financing across the board. Next slide. Here's some details about some of our eligibility. Some of the important criteria are outlined on this slide here. The properties need to be privately owned, including commercial, industrial, agricultural. As I mentioned earlier, they can include multifamily housing, meaning 5 or more units. This financing can cover hard costs like literal nuts and bolts and construction materials, and soft costs, project management, application, administration. These are all covered and eligible under the program. The financing can be flexed as a refinancing tool. So if the terms are favorable and the project meets the project features meet the other eligibility requirements, that's an option, as you see on the Trenton Mills example project on the slide here, that was partially used as a refinancing tool in that project. A lot of flexibility, and we'll quickly get out of my areas of expertise as we start to get deep into the financing mechanism tools, but that's why we have EDP&C in our corner, and they can help people navigate what those options are, questions and answers, and details that are available as people are exploring these opportunities. Next slide. So this is a little chart of what happened and what's coming up. I do have a little real-time update. So the check boxes there are the things I've mentioned, the hoops that are required that we have gone through at the Buncombe County level. The spring 2026 is happening. So we have good news that on Wednesday, March 18th from 9 to 10 a.m. at the Buncombe County Administrative Buildings, we will be hosting in partnership with the county and with EDP&C an actual workshop. So question and answer, a little presentation with the real-time experts in the room, excuse me, and an opportunity for our commercial property owners who may be really excited or just curious or anywhere in between to come and workshop it out with us. Of course, we'll share that in lots of different ways after this meeting, but real-time update there. The City of Asheville, in terms of our supporting resolution, we are here today at the PEDE committee and looking for action from this committee to move a supportive resolution forward in council as a way to support and raise the profile of this opportunity in our community. Next slide. Just reiterating our key takeaways here, and want to really just double down on our enthusiasm for this new tool. Anything we can do to raise the bar and provide opportunities to build our local green economy. It will hopefully further incentivize our commercial property owners, developers to pursue these energy efficiency, renewable, water conservation, and enhanced resilience features as they're looking at renovations or new project planning. And on my next and last slide, I have a suggested motion, but of course also happy to entertain questions.
Before we jump into questions, I just have to do a little nostalgia that when I was the sustainability director, we were looking at PACE, and our state legislature has done us few favors in that time. But this is a huge opportunity for our community, especially after Helene. There's just so many folks who are really saying, I want to build as resiliently as possible, and this gives them a financial mechanism that has been missing. We also know, I mean, we talked about financing a lot earlier with addressing housing. We know in the clean energy world that financing is a major, major, major gap to getting to the visions we have and our 100% renewable energy policy. So this is a pretty powerful tool. And I don't think I can make a motion as a chair, but I can't wait to vote for this. It's so exciting.
Agree. Kim, you have your hand up.
Thank you for the presentation, Kira. I spoke with a couple business owners locally that were interested because they own their building. And when they researched it, they were too small. So the question was, where is the threshold issue? What changes would be needed to make it possible for small businesses to participate? And is there a possible workaround for some sort of like bulk or community or group buy? Let's say that a business is not able to make it work on their own, but there's a business association that could make it go together. And if maybe it's possible we don't have the answers to all those questions now, but I think we should be ready for the community conversation in March, because I know at least this business owner would like to know more.
I definitely do not have that answer today. And I'm excited to, the EDPNC has been super supportive in all of our questions as we've worked through process over the last year since this passed at the state. So I'm happy to bring that question and do our best to see if we can at least prepare next steps or a response for the March meeting.
So if there are no more questions, I can make a motion. Paige, did you have your hand up?
It's really an unrelated question. Go ahead.
Recommend to approve staff's request to adopt a resolution support action taken by Buncombe County Commission authorizing countywide participation in the commercial property assessed capital expenditure CPACE program.
Second.
All right, roll call vote. I always think that's so funny, but Councilwoman Turner,
Aye.
Councilwoman Roney,
Aye.
and myself, aye. The motion passes. Excellent. And Sage, did you have a question, or should we?
Well, I was just a little thrown off because I thought this was a new program, but then you said you were looking at this when you were the director.
PACE as a concept, the mechanism
Okay.
being able to tie this to your property. So part of what makes it so tricky is like if you're going to make a renewable energy investment, there's a financial proposition because you'll save on your energy costs over time. But real estate can turn over much quicker than perhaps the payback can come. And so when you tie this to the property, if I sell my house or I sell my business in 3 or 5 years, it would stay with the property, but the energy savings would keep accruing. And so that's where this really has transformed clean energy adoption in some places. So we had looked at residential for a very long time. And so the clarity from the state that we can do this is relatively new, but we were looking at, could we push and pilot? And there was basically just very vague language at the state that we were like, maybe we can pull off being vague. And it just never really came together.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm. All right. Thank you, Kira. Appreciate all your hard work. And to our peers at Buncombe County, I also serve on the county's subcommittee like this on energy and environment as just a citizen. They have citizens on their council or their commission committees. And so, I mean, the county is really taking a big lift to make this happen. And I'm just so glad, like we are partners with them on our clean energy goals, that we're partners in really driving this program to be successful as well. Okay, with that, we are at our 5th and final agenda item, which is where we take public comment. Katie, do we have anyone in the queue?
Yes, Madam Chair, we do. Just one moment. Caller ending in 5202. Your line is now open and you will have 3 minutes. Just one moment. Looks like we're having some technical difficulties. One moment.
Thanks, Katie.
While we're waiting to resolve that, I was going to bring it up for future agenda items. I know that we got an email from the chair of the People and Environment Recovery Board, asking about the ability for the UFC, Urban Forestry Commission, to have a special meeting about the tree fee in lieu. We had talked about it at a previous iteration of this committee. I thought that staff were potentially supportive and members of this group are supportive, but folks are still waiting. And now that the tree fee in lieu article is out in media outlets, once again asking, can we direct at a committee level, and what does it take? Like, does it take an agenda item for future meetings? It feels stuck. How are we stuck? Why are we stuck?
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. I think I was on an email chain saying, yeah, I think this is an appropriate time to bring that committee back together. I'm not sure where it is either.
I think what I was hearing from the chair of People and Environment is they don't have the capacity to get into the weeds during their meeting, and they only meet every other month. So they would also appreciate it. So if you haven't seen that email from the chair to each member of this committee, I would love for us to support getting them moving.
Yeah, real quick, Councilman Maroney, thank you for that. If you could forward that email to me, I can get it to the right staff. And I don't want to get, I do think there is a plan to have UFC to meet on the fee in lieu. It may be a timing issue. So let me get a little more information on that, but I'm pretty sure that planning had identified that as a step and that as a project for the UFC. So maybe a sequencing concern, but with your email and a conversation with staff, we can follow up on that. Happy to do that.
Great. I will copy the chair and
I just sent
make
it
sure
along.
that
Thanks for bringing that up, Kim. I've been wondering about this one for so long, like why we can't just plant some trees. They grow better in the ground. You know, I say that lightly, but let's act. I'd love to.
Same. All right, Katie, did we get any progress on the public comment?
Yes, we should have. Just one moment.
Great.
All right, caller ending in 5202. Can you do a mic check for us?
Hi there, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead. I'll start the 3 minutes for you.
Great, thank you so much. This is Rachel from Sunrise Movement WNC. Thanks for the opportunity, as always, to give comment. Just a couple things about agenda items for today. Just generally speaking, we're really excited to hear the conversation about anti-displacement efforts being really incorporated into the development and housing conversations, as well as making sure we are thinking of creative ways to get deeply affordable housing built. So really appreciated those ideas that were brought up today. Also just want to share our thanks and excitement about the UDO update process that's going to be coming up. Thrilled to hear that the climate emergency is going to be something that will be incorporated into potential updates, and look forward to participating in that process as appropriate. Also, just wanted to name a couple things that were mentioned at previous meetings, but we know are ongoing things that we need to do work on. One of those is regard to our sustainability goals, we recently learned that obviously our goal is for the city, for internal operations, to use 100% renewable energy by 2030. And we recently learned that right now we're at 13.5%. So 13.5% out of that 100% we want, just to frame the urgency of action and how far we have left to go. Just want to keep reminding the community of that. We wanted to just highlight something that was brought up last time, that we really need funding for the Community Resilience Hub. I know that was something that we heard about planning last time, but there wasn't dedicated funding, and we would just really encourage using the DR fund for that purpose. So thank you very much for the opportunity and appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, that was our only caller.
All right. With that, we are adjourned. Thanks, everybody. See you soon.